it was round two for Formula 2, and this week we went to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. Welcome to episode 6 of Formula Talk. Today we're discussing and reviewing the F2 Saudi Grand Prix. Joining with me today, as usual, is Tom. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. And yourself?
I'm not too bad, thank you. Now, I'm going to interrupt you already today. You know, it's taken barely a minute. I know, it started already, but what can you say? So, for those of you who are listening, we do have a little sponsor for today's show. Don't worry, it's not Manscaped. I'm not going to start selling you razors or Raid Shadow Legends or anything. But today's episode is indeed brought to you by Bet Online. Now, Bet Online remains your number one source for all of your college basketball betting this season. Not only that, you can also get analysis of every play, prop, and point at Bet Online. You'll find the latest odds, bracket contests, team matchups, and game trends at Bet Online. Updated odds for everything from live games, the conference championships, right through to the Final Four and the championship game. Bet Online is your college basketball headquarters this season. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use our promo code BLEAV, that is BLEAV, to receive your welcome bonus. That is betonline.ag, where the game starts. Now I'll pass you back to Sophia so we can review the 2023 F2 shenanigans at Jeddah.
Yeah, so let's get into it. Let's start off with qualifying. So it was a rookie 1-2 for qualifying, with Victor Martins and Oliver Bearman taking the top positions after a late red flag towards the end of qualifying, meaning a lot of key contenders could not have any fastest lap recorded or improve their previous time. So some of the key people, i.e. Teo Porcher, Zane Maloney, Ralph Boscham. Ralph Boscham did all right. He finished in the top 10. But a lot of the key drivers that we're expecting to pull out of the bag this season, because of this late red flag, wasn't able to have a good representative time. Wow, that's a big word for me, I guess. Didn't have a best time, meaning that they started very far off the grid, kind of like what Max had to do in F1 in Saudi as well. Start a little bit back from the grid. But as mentioned, Victor Martins literally pulled it out of the bag. It's been ART's 2 rounds pretty much, with Teo obviously topping the timesheets for qualifying in the first round, and now his teammate doing it for Jeddah. So who knows, maybe even in Australia, when we preview that and review that in the next couple episodes, it might be another ART on pole. Obviously as well, with qualifying, you get 2 points for being on pole. So Victor Martins already started the weekend with 2 extra driver points, which is great for the standings because it keeps on changing. And we'll discuss it a little bit later, because there's a big jump in one of the drivers from 17th in the standings all the way up to 4th, which is crazy, out of 22 drivers as well. And then Victor Martins pulled out a 1:41.326. He was 7/10 clear before the red flag was caused. Joining him, another rookie of Oliver Bearman from Kramer was able to secure second, and then Teo Porcher made it into the top 3. Looking at the back of the grid, towards the end of the grid, obviously, as mentioned, qualifying top 10 gets reversed with sprint. So it actually meant that Jack Crawford for High Tech would be starting on pole. Joining him is one of the race winners from the previous round, Ralph Boscham for Campos, will be joining him at the front of the grid for the sprint race. Now, passing it back to Tom to discuss the sprint race.
Yes, so the sprint race, it wasn't a F2 classic, and I've got to be honest, it wasn't what I was hoping or building up F2 to be around Jeddah. They all behaved, which is quite odd. Well, for the most part, anyway. It wasn't 100% plain sailing, but it wasn't like when F2 first went to, say, back in 2016. when they were just basically playing bumper cars for however many laps. But no, it's just to give you a quick rundown of your podium from the sprint race. We have the Red Bull junior driver of Ayumu Iwasa, who finished. He only finished 0.7 seconds ahead of Saturday's pole sitter, Victor Martins, who, bearing in mind, would have started a bit further down the grid due to reverse pole for the sprints. And then another roughly 3.5 to 4 tenths behind Martins was the other Red Bull, another Red Bull junior driver. Let's see, we can't say the other because there are about half a dozen of them on the field. We had Johan de Ruvela in P3 to take yet another podium in Formula 2. Now, I had tipped de Ruvela to do quite well this season, and it's sort of worth noting that with F2 is you don't see like the same driver winning, like the sprint feature every weekend. You will get quite a few different race winners. So this is where we start to see drivers such as de Ruvela or Pocher or whoever else is going for the title. You'll start to see them finish P3, P4, maybe P5, P2. They will always sort of be in anywhere between like the top 6 and maybe the top 8. So this is where we'll start to see some drivers almost like emerging as the title contenders. And yes, I am putting de Ruvela in there. I'm backing him. He had a good scrap with Drugovic last year. Ultimately, obviously, he didn't quite amount to much, but no, I have faith. It is worth mentioning that Iwasa had a pretty damn good race yesterday. I say yesterday, we're recording this on Tuesday. So I'm losing track of the days already. Wishful thinking, eh? It's because I get paid on Friday. No, it's no. Iwasa, he really held his nerve, and he showed quite a lot of competence, and he showed a mature head on his shoulders to really hold that gap behind him. He was he really worked his way through the field, and he took the lead when it really counted. Ultimately, he then kept everybody behind him, including Victor Martins, who was absolutely rapid this weekend. By the way, he started P10, and he'd also been watching Max compilations on YouTube because he saw just how to overtake and get back up to second from when you started back in the pack. It was it was a good race. Again, like I said, it wasn't a classic, and I think maybe that's more to do with the circuit, but that's a different conversation for a different day. That's probably a different episode in itself, and I'm not going to go into that. But I will pass you back to Sophia whilst we have a quick nosy at the feature race results.
Yeah, I mean, just a few things to mention about like the sprint race as well. There was 2 safety cars coming out. First time was for Zane Maloney, who got clipped on the second lap, which brought out the safety car. But then Iwasa was in P1, so he had to do the restart, which was great. He started at the last minute for that. And then leading into how the feature race standings would be as well, Teo Pocher decided to go on the inside the first time around on turn 2 and overtake 3 cars. And then he tried to do the same thing on the following lap, trying to overtake his teammate, when he, I guess, just overshot his braking point and went into Oliver Bearman, who would be starting P2, pretty much taking both of them out on lap 6 out of 20 laps. So that brought out the second safety car. Iwasa pretty much went quite ahead on the restart, like I would say about 2 to 3 corners before the starting line and everything, and just kept it on his own. But lots of battles, lots of DRS. Having sitting on the press conference as well, Victor was not expecting to be on the podium, and I think it gave a lot of confidence, given that he's not really raced in Jeddah before because of Formula 3 and all that, moving into F2, but it definitely did help him for the feature race. So because of looking into the feature race, because of Teo Pocher's accident, he received a 5-place grid penalty at the start. So he started P8 on the grid. This meant that, was it P8? No, P11. No, P8, yes. So, but obviously as well, it also helps Ollie Bearman, who, as mentioned, was taken out by Teo Couture in sprint. He was starting P2, so more points to play as well in the future races. The full racing points, so 25 for first, 18 for second, 15 all the way down, similar to Formula One. And again, fastest lap also gets an extra point. However, there was a lot of chaos, some of them. A lot of drivers were trying to keep clean, very, very clean throughout the race. There wasn't as much safety cars. There was a virtual safety car on the second lap when Brad Benavides had to be pulled off after making contact with Amaury Cordial, the Virtuosi driver, causing damage. But again, as a VAC, that was on lap 3. Pretty much it ended very, very quickly, as luckily Brad was able to pull off towards one of the exits. And with the new rule as well for DRS, even with the VSC, DRS is deployed pretty much straight away once VSC is ended, which allowed some of the drivers to battle it out like crazy for the following laps.
It really made a difference to the racing this weekend, and I know it seems like such a sort of like small change to have DRS open straight away, but especially given the F2 cars are spec cars, I know teams will run different setups, so obviously they'll run different wing angles, different suspension angles, and toe and stuff. But the cars are the same. They've all got side pods, Mercedes, and they all they are all fundamentally the same car. So it's for me, I think, although that's a small change, that really adds to the sort of spectacle of F2, and it just means that you've always got to drive, especially with how sort of brave some of these F2 drivers are. Some may call it brave, some may call it other things. I'm going to call it brave when they decide to just dive at the inside and have a look, and if they've got a bit of a toe DRS. It certainly makes a good viewing. I'll give you that much.
Oh, definitely. And even just strategies as well. So pretty much majority of the grid was on the super soft strategy, whereas occasionally some of the other drivers were staying for the long strategy. And with the safety cars and tire deck, even though it's not as bad as Bahrain, it was still quite a play to see when to pit. And a lot of teams were pitting on lap 7, which according to the FIA and Pirelli, you could only pit after lap 6 on the super soft. So pretty much a lot of them went one more lap to go for the undercut to try to make for the podiums and everything. And chaos in the pits. It's very small. You can't double stack in Formula 2 or in Formula 3 because of how narrow the pit is for the drivers and the teams. And also they have less people working on the pit stops. It is one mechanic per wheel, and they both do the gun and the wheel change. So it's a little bit longer than F1. So you definitely want to make sure that your mechanics are quick for the change, because you can see some overtaking even in the pits because of how good some of these teams are. So some of the drivers to look out for was Doohan, Vesti, Iwasa, Porsche, and Kashmani. They all pitted with also wearing the top 10 for the medium tires to go for the long distance. Victor Martins closed in on Ollie Bearman prior to the pit stops and was able to successfully overtake Bearman on lap 10 to take the top position. However, he was forced to give the position back, having gone beyond the track limits on the pass and gaining an unfair advantage. However, Martins, he's going to keep on pushing. He tried again on the following lap, made it stick, leading into the first corner with DRS. However, the battle between Bearman and Victor allowed Frederick Vesti, who we've not really seen, he's been a consistent driver, the Mercedes junior driver driving for Prema this season. He was able to close in and was quickly able to take second off of his teammates after Ollie was running wide out from the second corner. Continuing to gain momentum from that with consecutive fastest laps, Vesti began to put pressure on Victor Martins and closed within half a second by lap 15. Few mistakes, taking place, not just from Victor Martins, but other drivers of the grid. It was this one spot, I think it was like what, turn 2 or turn 3, where some of the drivers were kind of going a little bit far off the grid, not braking right, or just going too wide, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I don't know if they were intentionally missing their braking zone, because you get 3 or 4 warnings or sort of tellings off from the FIA before you actually get a time penalty. Yeah, it was to be honest, don't be funny, there were 27 corners in Jeddah, and I lose track after about 4. Especially when F1 sometimes, or the FIA, I should say, sometimes calls a kink a corner, but then also calls it a straight. So who knows? Looking at you, Austria. I know the place you mean on track. Yeah, it was. We saw it in F1 a bit as well. Where drivers just missed their braking point and just had to take to the runoff. At least given how quick Saudi is, at least there was space to have the runoff. Because if it wasn't, could have been a bit nasty.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there was even a point in both the feature and in the sprint, you had 4 cars wide on the straight, which is mind-boggling to hear. Like I hear like Alex Jake, I think, and Alex Brundle, who was commentating for the F2 race, like absolutely astonishing. You could see so many cars on the straight just going side by side. Who's going to brake first? Who's going to pull out first? Who's going to play it safe? Absolutely crazy. But pretty much, as mentioned, a lot of runoffs. And on turn 22 on lap 16, Ollie Bearman actually got tumbled down the standings behind Druva and Iwasa, pretty much keeping ahead of Doohan just about for the rest of the race. However, Victor Martins spun out as well on the similar space as where Ollie Bearman was, pretty much by turn 4. And this also triggered a virtual safety car because he just couldn't get out of it. I think he tried to keep on going, and I think he anti-stalled or something like that, and pretty much just couldn't keep on going and had to DNF for the race.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, given the pace that Victor Martins was showing this weekend, he'll have been pretty damn annoyed to spin it like that and have to and to lose that pace. We saw how good he was in quali. Obviously, now let's take that with a pinch of salt, because not all the drivers managed to get their final hot laps in. Obviously, the track was ramping up, because rubber was being laid down and the track was actually getting a bit warmer. So the tires are getting sticky. They're really getting into the ideal operating window. But alas, it's he even taking that out of it, he was still showing good pace. So he'll have been really annoyed with himself for spinning where he did. And also, it's on, especially on a circuit like Jeddah, or if you look at someone like Singapore or Monaco, with these narrow street circuits, if you spin and your car's facing the wrong way, you better be damn good at a 3-point turn to get to get yourself pointing in the right direction. Especially given how poor a turning circle these cars have, because obviously they're racing cars. They're not the kind of car that you pop to Tesco in or something. So although could you imagine that you just went to Tesco and just went F2 car parked in a disabled bay? Go like, come on. But no. Jokes aside, it was. I think spinning on a street circuit like this, it hampered Martins, and when Bearman spun as well. And when if you even make a slight mistake, and I think that's what the FIA wanted with this kind of circuit, was it's going to punish you like that because it's really unforgiving. So in some ways it's done its job, but it also, certainly from my perspective, I don't really think that it's fair to look at the drivers who went off and say, they lost 6-7 positions. Just like, well, yeah, they're going to, because they've just slightly missed their braking zone, but they can't turn the car around safely until half the pack has gone past.
Oh, definitely. And with Ollie as well, even though he did spin, he still finished in the points. He finished, albeit the last position for points in P10. But throughout the race, just so many spins, and even stuff that we didn't even see as well, because there's just so much going on. And obviously there's a lot of battles. DRS is proving to be very strong this season as well in Formula 2 and probably as well for Formula 3. And we'll see a lot more when we go to Australia, given the fact that none of these drivers, both in F2 and F3, have ever raced there. So that's going to be a key indicating on where experience and skill will lie. But we'll definitely talk about that in other episodes. But Frederick Vesti continued his way from the field, pretty much taking the lead, and was able to take the top position for the full 25 points. This gives Prema their first win since Monza 2022. Now, that's not that far away because Monza was that was Imola, I think. It was pretty much, Prema's been very quiet. Last season, they didn't do as well with the team, but I feel like this is probably getting them back on track for it. Joining him in the podium was Jack Doohan, finally gained the points, and then joining him for the third position was De Ruvler, and I think that is close to what your predictions were. Obviously not Teo Pocher, but you did mention Jack and Jehan, but maybe I think in the different order.
To be honest, I'm just going to take what I can get, and I mentioned. I wish I had a mention. I mentioned Jack Doohan and Jehan de Ruvler. I was going to say Pocher then. That did not happen. As far as I'm concerned, I just said they're on the podium. I didn't say an order, so that's a victory for me.
We're not talking about my predictions.
Why?
No.
Why? What were
they all
they?
Wrong. They're all wrong.
Can you remind our lovely listeners what you said?
I think I said it was Teo. I can't remember who I said for second, and I think I said third was Zane.
You absolutely did say Zane was good.
I know.
They're wrong there, my friend.
Zane will always be on my podiums. That is without a doubt. He will always be on my podiums. And I think he just didn't have the best weekend, which drivers do get all the time.
Yeah.
I think because of sprint race getting clipped, that wasn't his fault, and having to retire from that. I don't think that had he continued on, it should have been fine. And also, I think because of qualifying, he started P16 around that area as well, which is very hard to move up in the grid sometimes. Obviously, we saw with Victor kind of moving up, but that's less traffic going from 10 to second than it is from like 16 to second. I mean, Zane did it in Bahrain, moving from 18 to second. Like, it depends on the track, and obviously not raced before as well at Jeddah. So it's what it is. Yeah, we'll keep running tabs throughout the season, and I think towards the end of the season we'll just have a complication of like who got the most right, who didn't, and
maybe we should have a word with our sponsors, Bet Online, and see if they can put odds on.
Odds. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
who's better?
And also next week, Sophia is predicting Zane Maloney for the podium in F1. Never mind F2, because she likes it that much.
Yeah, he's going to come into Red Bull after Danny Rick.
Oh, good.
But yeah. So pretty much the standings is staying the same to an extent. Ralph Boscham, even though he was quite quiet, he did get some points in the sprint race because he finished fourth, so he got 5 points. However, he was out of the points for the feature. He's currently at 33 points. Teo Pocher with pretty much 2 non-pointers, I think, off the top of my head. Yes, he DNF'd on the sprint and he finished 13th. On the feature, he moved down to 32, so still not that far off. Moving up with the win from the sprint race, Owasa comes in at third. He's currently in third position, so he's moved up 3 positions, I should say, sorry. And he has 31 points. Now, the biggest jump into the fourth from moving up 17 positions of the grid, Frederick Vesti, he now has 28, and that's purely because he got the 25 points from the feature race. Joining him as well is Jehan de Ruvler, who's moved up 6 positions to take 5th currently in the standings with 24. So 9 points separating from 1st to 5th. Especially in this season, especially in F2 and F3, it's not like Formula 1 where you can run with it. It goes down to the last minute. Anything can change. Like, especially with qualifying, you get 2 points as well. That also comes into play. They literally left it to the last minute for F2 and F3 last season. You didn't know until Abu Dhabi or Imola. Imola? One of the ones in Italy. You didn't know until the end who was going to take the championship. So we'll see. championship standings for the teams, Campos and ART kind of stay the same, with 51 and 49 points respectively. Dams moves up one position to go into third with 44, so 5 points off of ART. MP Motorsport with Jehan being consistent with points this weekend, and also from previous round, they are currently fourth with 43 points. And because of Frederick's win, Prema has now moved up to 29. But yeah, that's Jeddah. I mean, we didn't know what it was going to be. It was going to be a mixed bag. You had a lot of rookies coming in from F3 into F2, not really raced. They've not tested here. It's not a consistent track for them. Even for some of these F2 drivers, the circuit's only been on since 2021. Some of these drivers, this is only the second year in Formula 2. Even the ones that have been racing previous years as well, they're still experiencing it and still learning from it. So overall, it was a decent weekend. I wish there was a little bit more racing. I wish there was more laps, but that's just me being very wishful thinking, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just sort of like looking at the circuits for a moment now. It
looks like a bobby pin.
it just looks like someone's gone on a piece of paper and just drawn a couple of squiggly lines. And even when you take out where in the world it is, and by that I don't mean PC World, British people should get that reference. It's just I'm just not sure how I feel about motorsport racing there. And you know, we're seeing this more and more with the Middle Eastern circuits. It just leaves me a bit just a bit uneasy is probably the word I would use.
I mean, at least there's no attacks. There was no attacks compared to the previous year. I 100% agree. Like, I'm all for racing in new circuits. I'm all for expanding the sport, but having lived in the Middle East as well, it was lovely and I did enjoy it. I feel like there's a lot of races that probably could have gone to other locations. I'm looking at South Africa, Kalami. I'm looking at just more world kind of racing. I agree.
Argentina.
Oh god, yeah. Like, bring back like some of the ones in Europe as well, let's be honest. Or even like bring back Macau. Like, obviously that's probably really unrealistic, but or Malaysia. Like some of these races,
yeah. Not Russia though, absolutely not.
Oh god, no.
Oh god, no.
Let's not with that one. But
no.
This is exactly what I'm saying. Like, the fact that everything going on in the Middle East, we're still racing in the Middle East, yet what happened in Russia obviously is the same, if not worse, potentially, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We're not racing there, but then we're still racing in the Middle East. It's a little bit of a double standard for it.
Yeah, and what happened to We Racers 1?
Oh, I've not seen any of that.
It's because they've dropped it for this season.
Is it because they're not allowed to be? I know for F1 they're not allowed to be political at all. I don't know how it is for F2 and F3. I mean, these guys are probably not wanting to like step out of them anyway because of they're trying to make it into F1. But
yeah, and I'm not saying this about the drivers because they're there to focus on the driving. I just mean more the organisations that are involved in us racing in these countries. Like, to me, it just makes a bit of a mockery of everything that people like Hamilton and Seb and all the rest of it are driving for. And I struggle to see how we can sustain races in countries where it is illegal to be homosexual, or if you have had gender reassignment surgery, you are even though you have transitioned from one gender to the other, and you have had reassignment surgery, it is still, you are still considered the gender that you were born with in that country, and you can be arrested for it. Tell me how that's okay. But I don't want to make this a political show, and I've got no intention of doing that, but I just feel a bit that we should, that certainly from my perspective, I just want to touch on that about Saudi.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to be too political of the space and everything, but there is obviously discussions, and we say this every year. F1 drivers say it every year. Social media says it every year. It's an ongoing kind of conversation, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I do agree about your points and cases for it for sure. But yeah, so that was the F2 review of Saudi. We are going to finish off this episode as we've kind of discussed a lot. Our next episode, we will be previewing Australia, even though I don't feel like this is enough to preview because both F2 and F3 have never raced there. We'll also be discussing F1 Academy. We finally, as of today, the 21st of March, our final grid has been confirmed. The entire grid is going to be confirmed. So with that preview, we'll be talking about who these drivers are, looking at the calendar, looking at the cars, and looking at the teams as well. And there might be a few new guests as well on the podcast. And who knows, we might be actually live as well finally. So we'll see. We'll hope, maybe.
Well, yes, we do absolutely have plans to go live in the not too distant future.
Yeah, just setting up everything.
Yes, it's setting things up, working out schedules. Because as much as I would love to, as much as I'd love to do this full time for a job, both Sophia and I do have very demanding day jobs in the IT industry. We don't work together. It just so happens that we work in the same field, albeit completely different areas. So yeah,
definitely. Well, if you've enjoyed this podcast, we would love it if you would take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who've not yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like, subscribe, or a share. Formula Talk is alongside Grid Talk, which is available on YouTube, where most episodes will be recorded live. Grid Talk is recorded live on YouTube, though. But you can also find us on Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Burble, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalog of shows with previews, reactions to qualifying and race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. And again, make sure you subscribe so you're the first to know when Formula Talk or Grid Talk or any of our episodes are released. We'll be back soon next week for some Formula Talk content. As mentioned, we'll be looking at the Australian Grand Prix for F2 and F3 and discussing F1 Academy. Thank you, Tom, for joining me as always.
It's a pleasure as always, mate.
And that's also goodbye from me as well. Bye.